Good morning and welcome to Mystery, Murder, and Magic. Today we're going back to 1985 and talking about the time that the city of Philadelphia bombed its own residents. It's really sad and it's really not talked about that much. We hear about Waco and we hear about it often, but it's almost like this was swept under the rug. But today I'm cleaning out from under that rug. Not to make anyone mad, but just to let the people that were involved in this know that it's not been forgotten. Now, what I'm talking about today took place several years before Waco. And Waco, like I said, is a much talked about event, but what happened in Philadelphia has basically been forgotten by everyone except for those who was involved in it. MOVE, as in MOVE, was an organization that was both political and religious. And the name of the group wasn't an acronym for anything, it was just simply the word MOVE. Now, the group was based on anti-government, anti-technology, and anti-corporation. Its founder, John Africa, was a native of West Philadelphia and a Korean War veteran. And he combined animal and environmental rights and black revolutionary ideas and blended those with a back to nature type of movement. And he did this back in 1972, or he started this back in 1972. And as a side note, the organization still exists today. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to call MOVE a cult in the regard that we've talked about other cults on past episodes. But the members of MOVE call themselves a family. They all of them changed their last names to Africa in tribute to the founder and respect for the continent of Africa. And they lived in a commune. They would hold nonviolent protests at zoos and pet stores for animal rights. They often spoke out against police brutality and issues like wars. The community around them, meaning the folks who weren't members of the family, had mixed views on them. Now, some of them sympathized with them and their mission, but others were just totally against them, and they found them disruptive. In 1978, there were several run-ins between the authorities and MOVE. The mayor at that time, his name was Frank Rizzo. He was well known for his turbulent relationships with the black community and activists, and he ordered the MOVE family to be removed from their home. And when that conflict was over, one police officer was dead. 9 members of MOVE, which became known as the MOVE 9, were convicted for that death and given life sentences. And this caused a lot of debate inside and outside of MOVE. In 1982, the group decided to move to a quiet, middle-class neighborhood on Osage Avenue. But their neighbors weren't quite so happy to have them in the neighborhood. That's the neighbors, not the MOVE people. They constantly complained about the trash that was adding up around the home. And it often led to clashes between the neighbors and them. And after 3 years of living there, the newly elected mayor, Wilson Goode, who was the first African American mayor of Philadelphia, ordered that MOVE be evicted from the home they were staying in. And arrest warrants were also signed that were charging 4 of the group's members with parole violations, contempt of court, illegal possessions of firearms, and making terroristic threats. The mayor and the police commissioner had actually even deemed MOVE as a terrorist organization. Now, knowing that this was not going to go over peacefully, the surrounding neighborhood was evacuated the night before things got out of hand. And those evacuated residents had been told that they'd be allowed to return back home after 24 hours. But even though the authorities had the forethought to do these evacuations, no one could have known just how violent things would become the following day. Nearly 500 police officers and the city manager, his name was Leo Brooks, arrived at that home that Move lived in to execute the arrest warrants on that Monday morning. It was May 13th, I believe. And at first they tried getting the members out by turning off the power and water, but that didn't work. Then Police Commissioner Sambor, he read this long speech that started out with, "Attention, Move. This is America. You have to abide by the laws of the United States." But there was still no response. So the police decided to use force to get the people out. And y'all keep in mind, at this point, there were 7 adults and 6 children in that house. Now, I would say that things were going downhill from here, but they were already headed in that direction. I'm going to say that the slope of the hill took a sharp drop, and that's probably the best way to put it. There was an armed standoff between the police and the Move members still in the house. Police threw tear gas into the house while Move members fired shots back at the police, and it was believed at that time they were using semi-automatic and automatic weapons. Officers used more than 10,000 rounds of ammo before the police commissioner gave an order that would change the course of history. He ordered that the compound be bombed. Right here in the United States, an American police commissioner gave the order to drop a bomb on a home that contained American citizens. And like I said, some of those were kids. 2 one-pound bombs were dropped from a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter. And those bombs contained a dynamite substitute called Tovax. And it had been supplied to them by the FBI. Now, those 2 bombs were aimed at a shelter on the roof of the house. And after the bombs went off, a fire started. 11 people in the house were killed that day by the fire, including 5 of those being children. Among the deceased were John Africa, Rhonda Africa, Teresa Africa, Frank Africa, Conrad Africa, Tree Africa, Delicia Africa, Netta Africa, Little Phil Africa, Tommaso Africa, and Raymond Africa. A lady named Ramona Africa managed to escape the fire. She made it known later that as people were trying to escape, police officers were firing at them. Now, she said that they were trying to gather the children and their pets, and the entire time they were yelling out to the police that they were coming out. But when they'd try to exit the house, police would start firing at them, and that forced them back into the house at least twice. Now, Ramona and a 13-year-old child who had survived that fire were burned very badly. But the destruction, it didn't end with just the home that the compound was at. The Philadelphia Fire Department let the fire burn out of control, and 61 of those evacuated homes were burned to the ground. And this was like a 2-block or a 2-city block area that was on fire. Now, in the aftermath of the bombing, Mayor Good formed a committee to investigate this situation. Police Commissioner Sambor resigned from his position, but later he said in a speech that he had been made the surrogate. And I think What he was trying to get at was that someone had made him be like the stand-in for executing that order of dropping the bombs. In the following March, that committee came back with its findings. They condemned the actions of the local government and said that dropping a bomb on an unoccupied row house was unthinkable. And with that being released, the mayor issued a public apology. He later said also that those fires had not been intended. It was an accident. I don't know what's supposed to happen with bombs going off other than a fire was an accident. Okay, but anyway, there were also 2 grand jury investigations and a civil lawsuit, but not one single person was held criminally responsible. How can somebody not be held criminally responsible? They took out an entire neighborhood, destroying homes and everything in those homes. They killed numerous people, including children, but not one single soul was held criminally responsible. No criminal charges were filed. And I can't even wrap my mind around that, okay? It's just like my head is not getting it. But get this. The chairman of that committee, his name was William Brown III, he said that it was clear that the MOVE people did not have automatic weapons. And it was later found that they had a couple of shotguns and a rifle. And he went on to say that the police fired so many rounds into the MOVE house that more ammo had to be brought in from police headquarters. And about the fire, he said that when it first started, it could have been easily put out with a bucket of water. Now, there's also these theories that say that the police commissioner and the fire commissioner let the fires burn as a tactical plan, but I can't say that there's any truth to that one way or the other. On top of Ramona Africa's injuries from the fire, she ended up spending 7 years in prison on rioting and conspiracy charges that had been filed before the bombing. And remember how I said that the neighborhood could return to their homes the following day? Well, for one thing, they had no homes to return to. But another thing is that they weren't allowed to return until the following year. And many of the houses that do still remain in the neighborhood are standing vacant to this day. In 1996, Ramona Africa received a $500,000 settlement for the pain, suffering, and physical harm that she suffered from the fire. But you know what, y'all? I bet that barely touched her hospital bills. And then in 2005, residents of the neighborhood filed a lawsuit seeking compensation for the damage the fire had caused and the cost of having to relocate. And they were awarded $12.83 million by the city of Philadelphia. Now, just this past year, Billy Penn, he's a reporter for WHYY-TV, he revealed that the bodies of 14-year-old Tree and 12-year-old Delisha Africa, which had been kept at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, had been transferred to some researchers at Yale, and their bodies had been used in videos for an online forensic class called Real Bones: Adventures in Forensic Anthropology. So first of all, y'all, who agreed to let anyone have these kids' bodies? They deserved a final resting place, not to be specimens. And second, this is just my opinion, y'all, but Adventures in Forensic Anthropology sounds like some sick title for an online course. I mean, who can even take that seriously? I mean, what the actual hell? But members of the MOVE group were also shook up by it. And the city said that the remains had been unclaimed, but after it was exposed in 2017, that the city's health commissioner, Thomas Farley, had ordered the cremation and disposal of the victims' remains without even identifying them or contacting their relatives. Well, Farley resigned from his position in 2021. But the day after he resigned, a box was found in a refrigerated area with a label that said, "Move." Inside that box were uncremated remains of the victims. Those remains have since been returned to the Africa family and were buried by a tree in Bartram's garden. That's a park in the West Philadelphia area. Now, y'all, how is it that not only the bombing took place, but it took 36 years for the victims' loved ones to lay them to rest and maybe get just a little bit of a sense of closure? This whole thing is messed up on so many levels. It doesn't even make sense. But like I said, it's been swept under the rug for so many years. Well, y'all, that's all I have time for today. I'm still mind blown. Even though I've been looking into this for quite some time, I still just can't get my head wrapped around all that happened. But y'all, catch me on Wednesday. And that's when I do the midweek mini. Y'all have a great week.